Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. Got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. I'm going to stop telling you what interviews to look forward to. Those of you who remember, probably a few weeks ago, I was mentioning, I'm still working on Retro Man Cave. Neil over there at Retro Man Cave. I am. And I'm going to stop being excited and saying, hopefully I'll have that for you by X date. Just going to, when I do an interview, I'll put it in the can, and then you'll see that I do it. It's a bit presumptuous to say, we're going to do it, because things always come up. So, I just wanted to let my audience know that, since I like to be as forthright as possible with you. Got a few things to talk about here in today's podcast. First, for whatever reason other than I'm just appalled at this story. A few months ago, I heard a story in passing, and maybe some of you heard in passing, about the hoverboarding dentist. And so my initial thought was, and how he got in trouble. Well, he's been sentenced now. The story has resurfaced. He's been officially sentenced to 12 years in prison. And that kind of puzzled me. I was like, wow, I mean, pulling a tooth while on a hoverboard is ridiculous. And if I walked into my dentist and I saw him or her standing on one of those stupid motorized hoverboard things, like, all right, John, ready to go? Nope. I would just leave. A dentist standing on a hoverboard, it's one thing if a dentist is standing there with an acoustic guitar and he sings a song about the tooth fairy or something like that. That's one thing to ease a child. To stand there on a hoverboard holding scalpels and instruments, not scalpels, but teeth pickers and needles and things and scrapers. No, thank you. No, thank you at all. So the story of that he got 12 years in prison, I had to look deeper. So what is this about? I mean, standing on the hoverboard, that's a liability thing. Sure, the patient could sue him or whatever. I don't know. I mean, the patient wasn't injured. It's just an incredibly stupid thing to do. So why the 12 years in prison? Turns out he got 12 years in prison for fraud. The hoverboarding thing wasn't necessarily what got the books thrown at him, but it didn't help his case. Partly because he texted video of himself doing it on the hoverboard, extracting the tooth while the patient was sedated. He sent the video of himself doing it to all of his buddies and friends, and that was stupid. Didn't help his case in court that this person was competent or should be a dentist. So the fraud was that he would unnecessarily sedate patients because of what insurance would give him. He would put down on the papers, he had to sedate these patients for X amount of time, and he would get compensated for the sedation. I'm not an insurance expert. I'm not a dentist. I don't know how that all works, but I do know that there is incentive for doctors and dentists to prescribe things and use chemicals, and they get, I don't want to call it kickback, but they get reimbursed for it, and insurance likes it. He gets to charge insurance for it, basically. Maybe insurance doesn't like it, but he gets to charge the insurance for it. So basically what he would do, in one case, I'm sure he's done it probably multiple times, but the court cited a case where he sedated a child for a simple teeth cleaning. Now, I don't know if the kid was 5 years old. The whole thing is, it seems unnecessary. I understand kid freaking out, but the point is that this dentist would use any excuse to use sedation, and he would keep patients sedated for longer than they have to, use more dosage than he had to for the procedure. And over the course of him doing this, he netted nearly $2 million from unjustified sedation. He brought attention to himself, even more so, he brought attention to himself by video recording himself on a hoverboard extracting a patient's tooth. Wobbling there on the hoverboard while he pulls a tooth, and the patient has no idea. She's unconscious. and he pulls the tooth, and then he takes off his gloves and rolls out of the room with his hands in the air victoriously. What a dummy. It's almost unbelievable. And yet, here we are. So, 12 years in prison, not for the hoverboard incident, but for fraud to the tune of around $2 million for unnecessarily sedating his patients. There's no charges of sexual misconduct, anything like that. It's just straight up fraud. 12 years in prison. So anyways, I just wanted to clear that up. So now you know the entire story behind the hoverboarding dentist. If I walked into a dentist office and he had an actual Marty McFly hoverboard, that would be different. But still, I don't want him to be on it while he's performing even just a routine cleaning. He slips up. Needle. I should stop talking about it because it's probably making a lot of people cringe just thinking about the dentist slipping with the instrument. Sorry, we'll move on. So GM, General Motors, I've got a few stories here today, if you can't already tell. I've got to the meat and potatoes pretty quick, though. There was 37 minutes of just talking, telling stories in the last podcast, but that's why I timestamp. So the next meat and potato story, GM plans to release 22 new EVs by 2023. So that in itself is a bit of a story. 22 new models of electric vehicles by 2023. But the interesting thing is, other than just the fact that more big automakers are getting on board with releasing electric vehicles, is that General Motors is going to use the same electric motor in every single one of the vehicles, at least as of now. It's called the Ultium Drive electric motor. And that's not crazy. It's not crazy to use the same motor, and scientifically speaking, when you're saying motor, you are talking about an electric motor. Americans, we say, oh, what kind of motor you got in that thing? You look at a sports car or a pickup truck. What kind of motor you got in there? Technically, that's not true because motor is an electric drive. An engine is what we mean when we say, what kind of motor do you have in there? We mean, what kind of engine do you have in there? What kind of engine do you have in that pickup truck? What kind of engine do you have in that sports car? Oh, I got a V8, I got a V10, I got a V12, V6, inline 4, turbocharged, supercharged, engine. It's just one of those American things, like we call gasoline gas. Technically, it's not a gas, it's a liquid, but we call it gas. You can argue it vaporizes and then becomes gas in the vapors and think, well, yes. So technically, when we say gas, it's not. I'm going to buy gas. Well, you're going to buy gasoline, technically. Most other people in the world called it petroleum or petrol. Whatever floats your boat, it's all the same stuff. Anyways, using the same electric motor across an entire line of vehicles, an entire fleet of vehicles, is not strange. And in different models of vehicles. For instance, Ford will use the same supercharged V8 in the Ford GT as it does in the Ford Lightning pickup truck. It's the exact same engine. It might be tuned a little bit differently, but it's the same engine. A better example of this would be that a random Toyota Corolla, Toyota Camry, even Toyota pickup truck, they can all technically use the exact same engine. So a Toyota Corolla and Toyota Camry can still both have the exact same 1.8 liter four-cylinder. It's just going to be a little bit more peppy in the smaller, lighter car than it would be in the big car. So manufacturers using the same exact engines across different models of vehicles, there's nothing new under the sun there. That makes complete sense. That's what they do all the time. Now, these Ultium electric motors, the thing about electric motors is they lend themselves to a lot more modularity. So, for instance, Tesla already does this with their electric motors. They offer some models, like you can get a Model 3 with one electric motor, or you can get a Model 3 with two electric motors. All the more horsepower and torque, all for traction control, and you can run the front wheels separately from the back wheels and such. And there's other models that have 3 motors in it. You can have models of electric vehicles with 4 motors in it. That's not a strange thing. So what I really wanted to get at here, what I was really curious about, wasn't that they're using the same motors in different models of car and in different application. One car can have one electric motor. So if you buy a base model Chevy Bolt or whatever, Chevy Volt, you're going to have the electric motor in there, and that's that. If you buy a little bit more of a performance model, it'll have 2 motors. If you buy a sports car, maybe it'll have 3 motors. Maybe they'll have 4 motors. You can just keep popping them around the car wherever you want to add power to whatever wheel you want. But what I was most curious about are the numbers. What's the power output of these? How strong are these motors? How much horsepower, how much torque and stuff? Because that's always what we want to know about. Well, it's going to completely depend. I mean, they will have up to a certain amount, I would imagine. We don't know the exact figures yet. I'll get to that in a second, what we can kind of figure off of. But it doesn't matter what the maximum output can be, because you can tune it down or tune it up to whatever application. They're not going to tune up an Ultium motor in a base model whatever to 350 horsepower and 2,000 foot-pounds of torque, because the wheels will just spin and spin and spin and spin and spin, and you'll just be burning rubber the whole time. You won't be able to move the car. So they'll tune it down to something more modest, like 200 horsepower and maybe 400 foot-pounds of torque. They can dial all that stuff in with an electric motor. That's what's so brilliant about it. So the same Ultium motor is not going to have the exact same horsepower and torque figures across different models. They will tune it and adjust it with resistors and however they manage the circuits. They can dial in as much power or as little power as they want. But while we don't know exact figures, GMC has teased the new Hummer, which, if you know anything about the Hummer, it's always been, if you look up in an encyclopedia gas guzzler, you'll see a Hummer. It's forgive the French, but it's always been considered a douche-mobile. Now it's going to be very green and economical and have electric motors, and will likely, whenever it comes out, it will be a competitor versus the Cybertruck. I still want a Cybertruck. That'd be so cool. Anyways, in the new electric Hummer, it has a total of 3 motors for a combined output of 745 kilowatts, or thereabouts 1,000 horsepower. So if we're dividing by 3, 1,000 horsepower power by 3, I mean, just very basic, crude math, it's 333.3 repeating whatever horsepower. So 330 horsepower effectively per motor in that Hummer setup. That doesn't mean that each one of those 3 motors is completely maxed out to full power. It could be that one motor is putting out 500 horsepower while the other 2 motors are putting out 250, or vice versa, or any arrangement. You can squeeze the graph here and there. The whole takeaway from this, I guess really, if we're geeking out about, we've been geeking out about power outputs and how you can modify the motors and tune each motor to do what you want it to do and how much output or how little output you want. The main takeaway from this is that another giant auto manufacturer is getting on the EV train. They can see the writing on the wall and they're hopping on board with it. That should be exciting news for everybody. And I know there are car people out there, I don't assume who you are or what you believe, that think that EVs are just the death of the automobile. Electric cars aren't real cars, blah, blah, blah. If it doesn't have a V8 engine and it's not getting 12 miles to the gallon and doing 500 miles an hour, burning through a gallon of fuel every 100 yards, that it's not real. You need the burble of the V8. You need the burble of the V10, blah, 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 blah. I get it. But at the same time, if you're a geeky car guy, you can appreciate those old cars while fully embracing the future. Just because EVs are the future doesn't mean that you're going to have to get rid of your old Camaro. That's not what that means. Jay Leno is one of the biggest car guys on earth, and his attitude is, Why not both? It's okay to like both things. It's okay to like old cars and new electric cars. Both are cool. They're different, but they're both equally cool in different ways. It is okay to like both things. You don't have to be in this camp or this camp and hate on this and hate on that. It's okay to like two things at once. It's okay to like two things at once. So the fact that more auto manufacturers are getting on the EV train is wonderful, wonderful news. What story do I want to go to next? Okay, I'll quickly mention, I guess, that Sony has officially announced that the PlayStation 5 will not natively support PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, or PlayStation 3. I would assume that means discs, because you can bet your bottom dollar they will still sell PS1, 2, 3, and obviously 4 games through the store. So it's not like you're not going to be able to play Final Fantasy VII in any sort of different format, whether you want to play the PlayStation 1 version or a remastered version. It's not like you're not going to be able to play PlayStation 1 games or PlayStation 2 games or even PlayStation 3 games on the PS5. It just doesn't natively support them, at least with the disc. I don't think that's any shock. I mean, it's kind of rare, if it exists at all, that there is much backwards compatibility in modern consoles. And one would think, well, that's just a money grab from PlayStation. Well, it's different. Architecture from PlayStation 1 is different to PlayStation 2, is different to PlayStation 3, is different to PlayStation 4. The entire architecture of how the game is programmed is different. So basically what you're talking about with backwards compatibility is emulation. And emulation takes a lot of horsepower. It takes a lot of horsepower to emulate a PS2 game on a modern PC or even a PlayStation 3 or 4 or what have you. It takes resources because it has to basically decode and recode things in a way that the newer console can understand. And that's, while it's not impossible and while the horsepower certainly exists, I can understand Sony just saying, yeah, if you want to play PlayStation 1 games, buy a used one on Craigslist for $15. I mean, why do we have to include it in the PS5? You could also argue that you could put the PS1 hardware, it would be miniaturized at this point. You could just pop in a daughter board somewhere in there, or just one integrated circuit that would handle the PlayStation 1 games, or even the PlayStation 2 games, arguably PlayStation 3 games. You could just put a separate area of the circuit board that is a PS3 effectively, that is a PS2 effectively. But then you're getting into costs and different chips and manufacturers, and it's just a nightmare headache that Sony, it all comes down to cost. And if they did that, let's say the PlayStation 5 was backwards compatible with everything, just natively. You could put in a PlayStation 4 disc, of course. You could put PlayStation 3, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 1, and run it all natively. Well, that means that Sony would have to add all of that hardware natively into the system, and there's no way they could come out with a system for $499 or $399. It would be an exorbitant cost because all those components cost more money. So the consoles would cost $100 or $200 more just so that Sony could even approach making ends meet on the cost of building each console. So yes, it's a bummer. You don't have you can't play PS1, 2, 3 games natively in the PlayStation 5, but it makes sense. And again, PlayStation 1s and 2s and 3s are a dime a dozen. There are a dime a dozen out there on the used market. I just don't think Sony was bothered with it, and I don't think that too many people in the end are going to be completely that salty and butthurt about this. It just makes sense now. Sony's going to do the same thing that Nintendo does. You have retro arcades. You have retro games. You can play a select amount of Super Nintendo titles on the Nintendo Switch and NES titles and Game Boy titles. It's not the whole library. You cannot jam a Super Nintendo cartridge into your Switch. That's not going to work. You can hack some Switches. I don't know exactly how, but I know you can hack the early model of Switches and run Android on there and then run all the emulation you want if you are so inclined. But anyways, PlayStation 5 doesn't natively support PS1, 2, or 3. Bummer, but is it that much of a bummer? I understand Sony. I understand geeks who would be upset by that. But at the same time, you know, not that much of a big deal in the end. So I'll move on to the last story. Yeah, this is definitely going to be the last story. What are we at? About 20 minutes or so in here? Let's see how long this lasts. I did a video recently. Actually, let me go to my YouTube channel dealing with the 3DS. And I believe in the video, I was saying something like, the 3DS is not dead, because a report came out, it was like last year or something like that. I saw some popular video saying the 3DS is dead. Just thinking, it's not dead. It's not what it used to be, but it certainly isn't dead yet for all these reasons. Where did I mention that? Did I even put out a video, or maybe did I redact it or something like that? Maybe it was just in a podcast. Either way, I remember thinking recently, within the last year, that I disagreed with the sentiment that the 3DS is dead. Well, now the 3DS is actually dead. Not dead like you still can't play games with it, but Nintendo has ceased production of all models of the Nintendo 3DS. So they're not making the 3DS anymore, not making the 3DS XL, new 3DS, the 2DS, all of it has ceased. I'll read this blurb from Ars Technica. Nintendo's Japanese website now lists all the recent hardware variations in Nintendo 3DS line, the 2DS, new 2DS, LL, new 3DS, blah, 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 as out of production. So that's sad news. So out of production doesn't necessarily mean unsupported. I'm trying to see, maybe it'll come up here somewhere, when Nintendo will just completely unsupport the 3DS. I'm not seeing it anywhere in this article. But the 3DS came out in 2011. I remember, because I was super excited and I bought one. I'm thinking back to the Wii. And I did a video about the Wii a while back. How basically why the Wii is still worth it even today, because of emulation. And one reason why emulation is so good on the Wii and so possible on the Wii is Nintendo doesn't care about it anymore. It's not hooked up to any of Nintendo's servers anymore. You can't even watch Netflix on the Wii anymore. The Wii used to be the console, and remember, the Wii came out in like 2005, 2006. It's a 15-year-old console at this point. It's an old console. It's as old as the NES was in the year 2000. Think about that. The year 2000 and 2001, that era when the PlayStation 2 came out, the original NES was already 15 years old, 16 years old by that point. So the Wii is that old now. So it's not, no one would, you can't, I don't think you could logically argue, and it would be a fun argument to have for sure. If you think differently than me, you know where to contact me, geektherapyradio.com. But it's a tough argument to make that Nintendo should still be supporting the Wii. It's not even connected anymore. You can't watch Netflix. You can't stream on it anymore unless someone's there. I'm sure there's ways around it to hack into it and get onto a Netflix server. I'm sure there's ways to do that, but it's unofficial. It's not officially supported by Nintendo anymore. So the 3DS being out of production officially, according to Nintendo's website, doesn't mean that online connectivity for the 3DS is in any way, shape, or, in some ways going to be completely disconnected from Nintendo. I wonder, the reason I'm telling you the story is just, yes, it's sad there's no more production of 3DS consoles in any format, any form faction. 2DS, all of that's done. Nintendo is not running any off the assembly line anymore. That's sad. But the question becomes now, when does Nintendo officially end support? Because ending production does not necessarily mean ending support. the eShop and stuff, for instance. I haven't cracked open my 3DS in a while. I got to see what all is still available. Last time I opened it up, which was not more than a few weeks ago, I could still get onto the eShop. Unless I'm smoking crack or something like that, which I don't remember doing, but maybe that's an effect of crack. I think the eShop is still there on the 3DS. But for how long? We can speculate using the Wii as an example. Was it 2018 or 19 that Nintendo stopped with the Wii? I don't know. I was going to say 10 years, let's say 12 years when Nintendo stopped supporting the Wii. So if the 3DS came out in 2011, 10 or 12 years from 2011 would be around 2025, I say, 2023, 4, 5-ish, couple years. So it might be safe to assume that Nintendo will still support 3DS functionality in some form of online services for the next 2 to 3 years. I don't think that'd be far-fetched. But we'll see. It's something to think about. And that's what Geek Therapy is all about. Just think about that. What it also means, and I think I'll start wrapping up with this sentiment. What it also means is I probably need to collect the various forms of 3DS before I can no longer do so. So I have the 3DS XL, not the new 3DS XL. I have the 3DS XL and I have the normal 3DS. Now I'm going to have to go out and get a 2DS. Now I'm going to go 2DS XL, new 3DS. I'm going to kind of collect all of them because that's just what I got to do. And honey, if you're listening, I'm not saying that I would do that right now. But I'll cruise around eBay, see if I get good deals. If I even have to fix them up, even better. That's fun to kind of fix them up. But I'm gonna need the whole collection before they start going up in price. And how much price will they actually go up if and when they do? We know they will do. Nintendo has ceased production of the Game Boy decades ago, but you can still find a new original fat DMG Game Boy for $50 easily. It used to be you can get them for like $15. So they've gone up, yes, but they're still reasonable. And I would imagine that 3DS in any way, shape, or form, any model of 3DS or 2DS is still going to be quite affordable, truth be told, for the next several years. So there's not a huge rush. I'm not trying to send everyone listening right now to eBay to scoop up a 3DS, all the different forms of 3DS. But ending production is ending production. I'm just saying don't fret, because you can still get original Game Boys from 1989. You can still get them easily and at fair prices, at a modest price. I've got 2 Game Boys. One that's just unmolested and pure and awesome green milky screen, no backlights, no mods, no chiptune mods, not even any button mods, no mods whatsoever, battery pack mods, nothing. It is just a pure virgin Game Boy, original brick Game Boy. And then I have another one that is modded out the wazoo. I put white buttons in there. I've got a backlit screen, biverted. It's awesome. When I play Game Boy games, it's usually on that, unless I'm feeling really old school and the sun is coming through my window just right and I get out the puke green Game Boy and try to... What the heck is Batman doing? Is that Batman? I can't tell. That's what gaming used to be, kids. And we loved every second of it. It was glorious. And I think that's going to do it for this podcast today. Thank you so much for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Guess what? To have your attention, you are worthy of love. You're worthy of giving love. You're worthy of receiving love. And you're worthy of your own self-respect. Thank you so much for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Embrace your geek thing. Geeks are sexy. I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.